Hi. In this session, I'm going to discuss about one of the architecture in AWS. Okay. Basically, I want to go by history. So initially, we don't have the AWS. We have microservices which is deployed. Um, we used Docker for containerization, and for orchestration, we used Kubernetes. Okay, and we have the front end, the UI microservice with the React. Okay, so for this particular requirement, what is the architecture we came up? Okay, and what are the cons of those architecture? Okay, the pros and cons of that architecture, and what we did when we started onboarding all the microservices to AWS, what we did to improve the performance of the existing architecture. Okay, so that is the topic of this discussion. So I will be taking this in two sessions. In this particular session, I'm going through the existing architecture without AWS and what is the pros and cons of that existing architecture. Okay, in the next session, I will be covering up what we did in the AWS. Okay, so this is a requirement. Okay, so we have as I said, we have a front-end microservice using the React, and we have a legacy application which is developed using the Spring framework, which is using the Oracle. Okay, so the requirement here is some of the messages we display in this UI need to be configurable. When I say configurable, the business can change that particular message at any point of time. Okay, without no downtime of the system. It should be configurable and there should not be any deployment expected for this particular change. That is the requirement. Okay, so we had a similar requirement already in the legacy world, where in the JSP we went to display some of the messages which are configurable. So we already have a framework in the legacy world. So if there is any messages that is configurable in the JSP, okay, we send them, we get those values from the Oracle database. So in the Oracle database, we configured the key value there already. Like upon sending the key, we get a value and we display that value in the screen. Okay, in the JSP. So that is already existing in the legacy world. Okay, they want the same requirement in the microservices world. Initially, we thought of using the playbook to configure the key values, but the system team didn't agree for that approach because Kubernetes doesn't meant for doing these activities, and that is a kind of a wrong approach. And then we thought of creating our own database here. Okay, and configure all the key values in this database. Okay, but this particular UI is meant for a different purpose. It has its own purpose, right? And we don't want to complicate that one by adding this particular requirement inside this particular UI service. So this approach is also not valid one, because it's breaking the philosophy of the microservice. So what we thought, we need to develop a new microservice. It's a content management microservice. Okay, which can which can get a data for the key we sent. Okay, based on the key we sent, it can return as a value. So we designed a content management microservice. Okay, and initially we thought of having its own database. Okay, replicating what we have, its own database replicating what we have here in Oracle. But DBA team didn't agree for that because they don't want to copy the same data again and again, right? So they asked like use the same database. So we end up in sending a request to the legacy database and getting the data. So that is how this microservice was designed. Okay, the cons of that is the actual impact is the latency issue. Yes, the UI need to send a request here, and this need to go and access the database which is in other which is actually used by the legacy world. So this database is already busy with all the requests coming from the legacy application. On top of that, we also going to send a request. So there is too much of latency here and here. So because of that, our UI, like we can see, latency in the UI performance. Okay, so in the next session I can discuss about what we did, okay, as part of AWS, how we improved our performance and what are the changes we did in this architecture when we started onboarding all these microservices to AWS.